George Harrison. You won't believe what happened next. A song meant to bring people closer to the divine ended up dragging one of the world's most beloved musicians into a courtroom and changing how artists think about inspiration. Forever. Now, picture the moment the world learned the Beatles were done. Fans were heartbroken, critics were stunned, and everyone wondered what came next. Out of that silence stepped George Harrison, the quiet Beatle, carrying a new kind of anthem. He wrote My Sweet Lord in 1970, simple, luminous, spiritual. He wanted listeners to feel something bigger than themselves, to make the idea of God feel personal and present. And wow, did it land. The song shot to #1 in country after country. Even George Harrison worried a bit. Would people accept a pop hit that openly repeated sacred phrases? Turns out, they didn't just accept it. They sang it at the top of their lungs. But success has a funny way of inviting scrutiny. Pretty soon, people started whispering that My Sweet Lord sounded a lot like another tune, a 1963 earworm by the Chiffons called He's So Fine. Different lyrics, different vibe, but the melody? The overlap made listeners raise an eyebrow. If you hum a few notes of each back-to-back, your brain starts connecting dots you can't unsee. Was this a case of theft, or one of those cosmic coincidences that haunt creative people everywhere? The whisper turned into a lawsuit. In early 1971, the music publisher that controlled He's So Fine sued George Harrison. For years, lawyers circled a settlement, but nothing stuck. Eventually, it went to trial in 1976, and the courtroom turned into a music lab. Imagine being asked to bring your guitar to court and explain under oath how a song is born. That happened. Music experts dissected both tracks, chord progressions, motifs, phrasing, the way the main melody repeats. Over and over, the building blocks lined up a little too neatly. Even Phil Spector, who had worked with George Harrison, reportedly acknowledged the similarity. Here's where it gets complicated and, honestly, human. George Harrison didn't deny the songs sounded alike. He insisted he hadn't done it on purpose. He said melodies drift in and out like dreams. Sometimes what feels new just floats up from your subconscious. And the judge basically said, I believe you, but it still counts. That phrase, subconscious plagiarism, landed like a thunderclap in music circles. You might not mean to copy, you might not even know you did, but if the melody is substantially similar, it's infringement. Artists everywhere suddenly had a new fear. What if something you loved as a kid reappears years later in your work, and you don't recognize it until a lawyer does? If that were the whole story, it would already be dramatic. But the twist hits even harder. During the legal fight, the rights connected to He's So Fine were bought by Alan Klein. Yes, the same Alan Klein who had managed the Beatles and also managed George Harrison during this turbulent era. Think about the whiplash. One day, your manager is advising you in a legal war. The next, he's on the other side of the table, owning the very claim against you. The court later found that this move crossed a line, an ugly breach of fiduciary duty. Damages were ultimately reduced, and George Harrison obtained the rights connected to the song. But the emotional math didn't balance. Money's one thing, feeling betrayed is another. Trust is slow to build and fast to shatter. The verdict still stung. It branded George Harrison with a scar he didn't deserve, at least not in the way people gossiped about it. He had always been the introspective one, the guy who slipped away from noise to sit with his thoughts. To be told that your own creative instincts could betray you, that a melody from your heart might secretly belong to someone else, that can mess with any artist's head. So, what did he do? He wrote another song. In 1976, he released this song, a cheeky, cathartic jab at the whole mess, complete with a wink-heavy music video and a cameo from Eric Idle of Monty Python fame. The track is playful, but under the jokes, it's a pressure valve. You can hear a man turning legal pain into creative oxygen, refusing to let a courtroom define the rest of his art. And yet, the ripple effects kept going. That legal concept, subconscious plagiarism, became a ghost that still haunts studios. Remember the blurred lines verdict involving Robin Thicke and Marvin Gaye's estate? Huge payout, massive debate. More recently, Ed Sheeran has talked about filming writing sessions to document how songs are created, just in case he ever needs to prove the idea came from his own head? Wild? Maybe. Necessary? In this climate, probably. Courts don't judge vibes. They judge protectable elements, melody, harmony, lyrics, structure. If those overlap substantially, intent takes a back seat. Let's pull back for a second. Why does this case matter so much? Even if you're not a musician. Because it asks a question every creative person wrestles with. What is originality, really? Culture is a giant echo chamber. We hear, we absorb, we remix. Every artist is a collage of the songs, books, movies, and moments that formed them. George Harrison wasn't trying to cheat anyone. He was trying to bottle a feeling gratitude, devotion, awe, and pour it into a 3-minute prayer you could sing in your car. But the law doesn't measure feelings. It measures similarities. And sometimes that gap between art and law is where heartbreak happens. Still, there's a quiet grace in how George Harrison handled it. He didn't torch the world or bury the song. He acknowledged the similarity, lived with the verdict, and kept making music. That's the lesson beneath the headlines. Respect the past, record your play, process, and write with humility. But don't let fear stop you from creating. If anything, the case shows how powerful melody is, so powerful that two very different songs could feel like twins separated at birth. So, theft, or the most expensive coincidence in pop history? You've heard the evidence, you've felt the tension. On one side, a melody that lines up more than chance would suggest. On the other, a songwriter whose decades of work prove he didn't need shortcuts. My take? It's a tragic overlap. A melody that lodged itself in memory and resurfaced when the moment called for a song about faith. Not malicious, not calculated, but in the eyes of the law, still too close for comfort. Before we wrap, a quick shout to the other names in this saga who matter to the full picture. John Lennon, who spoke candidly about management drama in the band's final years. Phil Spector, whose wall of sound genius and blunt assessments hovered over the case. Alan Klein, whose choices turned a legal dispute into a trust crisis. Eric Idle, who helped George Harrison laugh when it hurt. And modern lightning rods like Robin Thicke, Marvin Gaye's family, and Ed Sheeran, whose battles show the case's ripple still reaches the shoreline today.